Hi, again, I'm Teresa Shecker, and in looking this week at the 3 sources from the American History and Life with Full Text Database, once again, I searched for resources on the Vicksburg campaign and the effects on children. The first source I found was on Nellie Grant. She was the daughter of Ulysses S. Grant, and the article title was A Simple American Girl, The Story of Nellie Grant and Her Mementos. This was by Gary C. Vitale. The article is property of the Illinois State Historical Society. Although it doesn't list a lot of their sources, where they came from, the content was written as though it was taken from primary sources, though they don't attribute them back to where their sources came from. For example, the article lists a story of Nellie and her brother Fred being with their father Ulysses S. Grant at the battlefield on the 4th of July, at the battlefield in Vicksburg. Fred told his younger sister that the exploding bombs and cannons were fireworks celebrating her birthday. Her birthday happened to be the 4th of July. But it doesn't say where the source came from. Nellie said that she couldn't imagine that her father could remain upset with the rebels after they had remembered her birthday in such a way. It's a really cute story, but it doesn't say where it came from. I'm remarking that this was very kind of the rebels. After the fall of Vicksburg, Nellie was kept busy sewing buttons on uniforms, and after leaving Vicksburg, she earned money towards the effort for wounded soldiers and freed slaves by dressing as the old woman in the shoe. And there's pictures of this story. She would be paid to take pictures dressed as the old lady in the shoe. People would either take pictures of her doing this or pay for the actual photographs of her doing this, and supposedly the money went back to wounded soldiers or freed slaves. But again, there's nothing that attributes this back to the story. Conclusions are made about Nellie at the end of her life and how she lived in childhood, attributing much of her life to the Civil War and her family's service to the country and how it affected her life. The second article I found of interest was that of a little-known man named Ussher Lachey. The article's title was A Frenchman Comes to the Hills of North Louisiana by G. McGinty. This is a primary resource document put together with help for the family members of Lachey. The methodology used is to trace his life from humble beginnings into the Vicksburg campaign and back into Louisiana. Lachey was not a slave owner, never owned much land. He was a hardworking man and found himself caught in the crossfire of the Civil War. He was actually a blacksmith. This story does have a lot of primary source documentation from his actual family. He ended up joining as a private infantryman that took him to the front lines of Vicksburg campaign at the height of the siege. When Pemberton had to surrender, Lachey made his way through the Federal lines and he went home. Apparently, Pemberton, when he had to surrender, he set his men free, but he expected them to find other Confederate lines, and they were supposed to join back with other Confederates. When he just went home, he never found other Confederates, and so he lost all of his state pension. So when he came home, he found out that he had fought for nothing. He didn't have any state pension. When he arrived home, he found that his wife had died and his mother-in-law was raising his children in a way that he didn't agree with. So he sent his mother-in-law home. Eventually, because of church records, we know that Lachey became a Baptist. He was originally a Catholic. He remarried a woman with whom he had 13 children. She was an Irish immigrant with the last name Connolly, and they had 69 grandchildren together. The last article I found interesting was titled Children and the Meaning of Suffering in the Civil War Area by Catherine Jones. The article is based around a painting by Lily Spencer called The War Spirit at Home, or Celebrating the Victory at Vicksburg. This painting explores 3 children dancing as soldiers while a mother reads of the war and a servant does the dishes. The article then discusses how children cannot be the topic of suffering in this area properly, as it presents an asymmetrical issue mentioning race, class, and moral value. While I agree that the evidence of this era is skewed more in one direction, it is not impossible to find evidence of more than one class. The article goes on and on about how it's very difficult to properly discuss children in this era because you can't really find anything that discusses children that are not of high class, and how only one class of children are discussed. And while this kind of is true, it's not fully true. I found a lot of stories where children are discussed of more than one class, and a lot of memoirs were done by people who weren't just of high class and of high value. Slave children were mentioned. Children of all classes were mentioned. And I think that this article is kind of hard to agree with. The methodology of this article seems to guide the reader only in one direction, and the conclusion seems to be that interpreting the significance of this topic is too difficult because the story has already been written only in one direction. So thank you.